Hello, Internet, and welcome to another episode of the Paper Cuts Podcast. My name is Brando, and joining me today, as always, in the Paper Cuts crew, we have the delicious Dan Jackman, we have Mark Magog Mercury, we have the maleficent Matthew Chang, and we've got Jim Jamboree Anderson.
No relations to the movie.
Not at all.
No.
I don't even know what movie. Hi.
How are you guys doing today? How's everybody this week?
Good. How about you, Brando?
Oh, fantastic. It's always good when you're talking comic books, and we're talking about one of my favorite comic books. This week we're going to be doing a sort of study analysis, in-depth dissection, if you will, of the seminal DC comic book event, Kingdom Come.
Oh shit, I thought we were talking about the Jay-Z album, you guys. If Superman were a slightly chubby dude from Brooklyn.
Yeah, he was like way over there.
Flashbacks. All right.
Sorry, guys. Back on track.
Already off track in the intro.
Okay, but yeah, so we're going to be tackling the story chronologically as it pertains. Obviously, spoilers ahead. I don't feel like that should be necessary if you read the title, but just for your preface, spoilers ahead. Here we go. We're going to start from the beginning of the story. A quick synopsis of the intro. This is an Elseworld story. It doesn't really pertain to the continuity. The story is written in 96, just to give you an idea of the type of comic books that have been released at the time. So it's released mid-90s.
1996.
96 is correct, yes. It started working on it in 93 and they didn't finish till 96. At least wasn't publicized until 96. So the story revolves around a dystopic future where Superman has retired from superheroing 10 years prior to the beginning of the story because of an accident that was in Metropolis. There's a trial and Lois dies, etc. He's discouraged from mankind to the point where he decides to go into self-imposed exile in the Fortress of Solitude while the world descends upon, or starts to accept more violent superheroes. And Batman has gone off to Gotham and decided to take authoritarian control. All of the superheroes in the Justice League have decided that without their leader, that they will all kind of descend onto their own paths. Everyone kind of figures out what they want, you know. Diana's ripped of her birthright, which is revealed later in the story at a significant point for some sort of reason. We could talk about it when we reach there. What is Hawkman doing, by the way? I remember
defending the rainforest?
Defending the rainforest, right?
Pacific Northwest.
Oh.
Yeah, he's in America, but he's in the Pacific Northwest, I believe.
Interesting.
And he's,
So he's
like
like
an eco-terrorist.
Yeah,
he's
he
like
you see
the
him
Earth
attack.
Liberation Front, but like Birdman style. Yeah.
Yeah, he attacks the overforesting or something like that.
It's
Okay.
like taking they
Captain
took-
Planet.
Yeah.
He's become the bird Captain Planet man. Okay,
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's the most interesting thing he does in the entire comics, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah.
we call him Bird Captain Planet Man
We'll always call him that. We'll never call him Hawkman again. I don't even know who that is. I only know Bird Captain Planet Man.
Oh, you mean Bird Captain Planet Man?
Good. Keep that mindset. Flash becomes basically like an embodiment of the Speed Force. He's all over Central City, like at all points in times. He's everywhere at once, just protecting it as like a sort of guardian angel, god of speed. Who else am I forgetting? Green Lantern is orbiting above Earth in his new space station made of green energy, and
Waiting for an alien invasion.
Yeah, just waiting for something to happen.
Straight up just like, if anything from space comes, I got this, but until then, I'm chilling on my throne.
When I
Yeah,
read
basically.
that part, I just had that scene from The Watchmen where Dr. Manhattan erects like his own Mars like universe over there, just like chilling. The music start playing in my head. I'm like, wow, that's really cool.
I always kind of thought of, that's a great comparison. I always also kind of thought of the opening credits of the first Conan movie when you just see him sitting on the throne, like he won, but he's also all depressed and fucked up, you know? It's just like, what do I do?
it is an ominous look.
Yeah.
Well, I'm pretty sure that covers all the base.
You also
I
curiously got Power Girl.
There's Power
Like
Girl.
70s Power Girl.
Who's now a power woman.
Is that-
now.
Yeah.
And she seems fairly well aged. I mean, I don't know if that's like a superhuman thing,
that
but
I mean,
Must be,
she's
like-
still rocking the boob window.
yeah, she is.
Yeah.
That would, if she wouldn't.
That's pretty much
That's
her
her only-
Superman symbol.
That is, yeah, that's like her definitive trait. Like, otherwise, she's just.
cleavage.
It's
In
just
my
power.
world, it means hope, right?
And there it is.
In my world, it means hope too.
And there it is.
Oh my god, drum roll please, internet.
50 points.
Kill it.
50 points. Alright, so let's take a look at the intro as we have it in front of us. A lot of people say that this story is a Superman story. Would you guys agree? I feel like, on the whole, personally, I don't think so. I feel like a Superman story doesn't usually give way to so many other characters. Like Wonder Woman gets a lot of showtime. Batman, Captain Marvel.
Pretty strongly disagree.
You do? Okay.
I know he's only supposed to be our window character, but Norman, I think his name is.
Yeah, the story is told through Reverend Norman McKay. Yes.
The Reverend Norman McKay, who's being gets these apocalyptic visions from the Sandman, is basically Ghost of Christmas Future through this whole event by the Spectre. And I think in a certain way is the protagonist, because this was one of the first big comics of the Neo Silver Age. And all the big comics from that era, or not all of them, but many of them, like Marvel's and Astro City.
Marvel's used a reporter, correct?
Yeah.
Are
all about how
superheroes
superheroes look from the ground up. It's not told from the point of view of the superheroes, it's told from the point of view of the people watching the superheroes.
Yeah. In
the same way that I think that for Marvel's and Astro City, it's definitely a ground-up view.
Yeah.
I think that holds for Kingdom Come. It's Norman's story.
Okay. I could definitely see that, because in view with Marvel's as well, I feel like those stories are a reaction to stories from the 80s, like those, like
Right.
Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, those really started that movement of looking at heroes from like a reactionary point. How would humans react to a superhuman interaction with them? So that's why the kind of stories we've kind of developed into.
I've always taken it, the entire story. Like, Norman is definitely the protagonist. Like, he is...
Yeah, he's probably the chief one giving the dialogue.
Yeah. I mean, weirdly, because he doesn't really do a whole lot until the end. He's sort of, like, separated from reality. But I've always taken it as it's a wide-angle shot of the entire DC universe, and every character occupies in the story the exact amount of space that they're supposed to. Like, I definitely think it's a Superman story, and he takes, like, almost center stage, but only because he's Superman and he's almost center stage of the DC universe, you know?
Yeah.
That's how I view it.
I think I made the allusion to Dante earlier, and I think there's also an element of that there, where the same way you have kind of Virgil showing Dante through the Inferno, or later in Swamp Thing you have Deadman showing Swamp Thing through the Afterlife during the Crisis. I think you have the Spectre playing Virgil to Norman's Dante as they kind of journey through this hell of a world.
Yeah, it's probably exactly what it is, man. It's probably pulled right from that. Like, I mean, especially when you consider it's supposed to be an apocalyptic Revelations-ish story, you know?
Yeah, it has an ominous tone to it in comparison to Marvel's, which is, I could argue, more positive.
Definitely. I think if any Alex Ross Marvel work, this is more like Earth X or something.
Yeah.
Have you heard of the story Alan Moore proposed, Twilight of the Superheroes?
I have.
The one of the infamous unfinished works that never really floated around.
Yeah, I actually read the proposal on the internet a while ago.
Yeah, I've seen it floating around there.
I think maybe we ought to take a minute and talk about the origin of Kingdom Come.
Please, go
and
ahead.
just like
there's a lot
the
about
creative origin.
Yeah.
So like I don't know. Have any of you ever read Twilight of the Superheroes?
I've
or at least
the
a
whole
synopsis.
thing. Like,
I don't know anything about it.
I've only flipped through it. I get the general premise that it basically leads to the same ending, where like there's an apocalyptic battle between the DC superheroes.
Right.
But the impetus is kind of like I didn't really look into that.
The Crisis fucked everything up with continuity, and so Alan Moore wanted to do a continuity fix, which they eventually ended up trying to do with 0 Hour. And so basically, John Constantine and Rip Hunter come back from this fucked up future to the present day DC universe to recruit heroes to go into their future to see what's happened. And basically, there are these ruling families, the House of S or something, which is Superman and Wonder Woman's family, the House of Thunder, which is like...
The Shazams.
And then there's like House of the Villains, and then there are the human heroes like Batman and weirdly the Shadow. I don't know if DC had the license rights at that time, but I think...
Probably Green Arrow showing out there too.
Yeah, I think Alan Moore, they were supposed to be kind of the human heroes. And then there were the alien heroes who had been forced off world, so the Martian Manhunter, the Green Lanterns, etc. And they each they had been forced out a long time ago. And basically, there's a marriage coming between Mary Marvel Jr. and Superboy, and that's going to upset the balance of power. And so Constantine and Rip Hunter go back. And there's also something in there about the question in investigating the bondage-related death of Billy Batson. It's of course. Yeah, it's an Alan Moore book. But so he proposed this. It went nowhere. He fell out with DC, stopped working for them. Although both the writer and the artist of Kingdom Come claim to have known about this, neither of them say it was a direct inspiration. A lot of people think Armageddon 2001, the 91 DC event, was what was the more direct successor to it. But in any case, Alex Ross came hot off Marvel's.
Yeah, real hot.
He had these character designs and a very basic idea for the premise. And so this is very different from a lot of books you'll see, a lot of the big books of the modern era where they were writer-driven. This one was artist-driven. And so Ross and DC approached James Robinson first, who was big on Starman at the time and the Golden Age.
He turned it down because he wasn't down with characters that he didn't create originally, correct?
Well, that was part of it. It was also because at the same time they also offered him Batman versus Hellboy or Batman meets Hellboy. And he thought of the two, well, what's this random DC Elseworlds that's going to run for 4 issues, or Batman and Hellboy? Like, what would you write? Like, with Mark Mignola? Mike Mignola, I'm sorry. And so, James Robinson, I just read the afterword in Starman, and he's like, it was like one of my great regrets that I turned down Kingdom Come to write.
Yes, Batman versus Hellboy thing.
So then they got Mark Waid, who at that point was writing The Flash, I think.
And
he was.
He had a decent knowledge of it, encyclopedic knowledge of DC's universe.
And pretty much short of Kurt Busiek, he's the most responsible for the whole Neo-Silver Age movement in comics. Mm-hmm. You get this guy with great fondness for old DC comics. Mm-hmm. You've got an artist who is just trying to cram as many DC characters as he can.
He wanted to do DC Epic. He wanted to do superhero.
To do the iconic DC thing. Mm. It may or may not have been inspired by this old Alan Moore thing. And really, if there's a ghost in this story, it isn't Deadman, it's Alan Moore. Because the number of things that are either shots at or references to Watchmen and Swamp Thing, maybe to a lesser extent Miracle Man, are very high. Very high number of these.
It was inevitable. Whether I don't know if it's even necessarily supposed to be like personal attacks or anything like that. This is rife with references to shit that's from that era. You know, like the dark. This is about the dark age of superhero comics that was so big at the time.
This is very much a superhero drama about the superhero genre.
Yes.
Like it's a self-parody and very much about the genre itself.
Yes.
In a lot of aspects, and we'll definitely dig into like all of the hues that we can find. But yeah, that's all the story preface. That was great stuff, Mark. Appreciate all of that. You were saying that this was an artist-driven story. I remember that being a big point of contention whenever I researched this, because I know when the story initially made its huge success at the time, Mark Waid was claiming a lot of success, and Alex Ross would kind of butt in saying that he had more creative input than Mark Waid.
I believe it.
And I definitely believe it, because when I think of this story, and I'll go into more reasons why later as well, I keep saying that, but the art itself, I think, is an extremely large facet to the narrative itself. Like, it implies more than some of the actual dialogue. Yeah, this is much more of an artist-driven story than it is an author.
It also hits Alex Ross's talking points.
Yeah.
Like, note to note. Like, this is like a, what do we do with Golden Age, Golden Age of comic books, whatever, Silver Age of comic books, but also, like, what do we do with the ethic of the golden generation of Americans? You know, how do we deal with that? What are we doing? Like, the Norman McKay character is supposed to be based off of Alex Ross's father. Like, Alex Ross's dad was, and his job too. Alex Ross's dad was a pastor. You know, I mean, to me, I've always seen this as, like, Mark Waid, he's here, obviously, you can see his voice, and you can see the stuff he's done subsequently similar to this, but this is much more similar to Alex Ross stuff to me than Mark Waid's stuff. Just to weigh in on that whole bullshit, you know.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Let's move forward with that sort of mentality of how the Golden Age era, or not the Golden Age, let's talk about the character protagonist which we've been skirting around the whole time. This is an excerpt from the back, Acknowledgements of Kingdom Come. The two most important people responsible for the project's existence, and mine, are my folks, Clark and Lynette. Clark, Norman Ross, is certainly a real-life basis for Norman McKay, and was kind enough to model for this project, helped to make tribute to my professional and good character possible. Okay, so this is basically a little acknowledgement in the back saying that Alex Ross based the main character of Kingdom Come, Norman McKay, on his father, Clark Ross.
I think it's really, really cool that in the back it actually acknowledges like all the different models that he used for each character, which is pretty fucking amazing that you can go and see that. It's not usually in like regular comics where you're going to go and see someone that uses real life references all the time, and it really shows when you have a powerful artist like Alex Ross and everything's hand painted with gouache.
Yes.
It's fucking ridiculous the amount of detail. It feels like a classic.
Yeah, from the get-go.
Just immediately.
The images in this are striking. It's almost a shame that this is a purely auditory medium that we're working with here.
Yeah.
I mean, this is something you have to look at to fully experience.
Well, I mean, obviously we posted this. I will try and steer away from things that may infringe us, but I will put some small visual aids if you're kind enough to watch it to this length. I will give you some preface to show how beautiful Alex Ross is.
And whoever modeled for like Captain Marvel's giant crotch bulge, like in that fourth arc, definitely deserves some credit.
Yeah, where he's
somebody posed for that.
Yeah, where he's standing triumphantly. Yeah.
Just waving his like package in fucking Superman.
Sal Abinanati.
There you go, Sal. People have been staring at a painting of your crotch for 20 years.
All right.
No greater honor. No greater honor.
All right, guys. Let's dig into some of the story meat now, since we are kind of so much preface. Let's get into the actual plot. So we start with Norman McKay, and he's struggling with his faith. Obviously, he's just gotten dreams passed on to him from the Sandman, a dear friend in his congregation, it seems. And these dreams that Sandman had were of Armageddon. They were of lightning and fire and eagles and angels and a lot of references to the end of the story. We will obviously proceed to in time. Norman McKay is struggling in faith. He's having a hard time believing in the future when the future looks so bleak with this world of violent and terroristic superheroes who basically have gang wars all over the city and really have pay no mind for what kind of destruction they leave in their wake. So he's struggling in faith. So when he gets approached by the Spectre, he's fairly surprised, and he's sent over to see Superman, who's also kind of given up on humanity in his own right, and he's also struggling, having his own kind of faith battle with humanity. Whereas Diana pops in and urges him to return to the world because of the first incident in the story, which is a group of superheroes. I believe Magog's they're leading them, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, Magog.
Justice Battalion.
Yeah, the Justice Battalion. A few of key characters that come back. They keep coming back to a few characters, like that one hero villain 666 with the 6 and the black armor and the dude who's always like angry.
He's not there.
He's not there?
I just want to touch on this real quick if I can.
Please.
The heroes that make up the Justice Battalion, beside Magog and
Captain Atom,
the Alloy, that's just the Metal Men,
which is supposed to be all the Metal Men combined into one.
Yeah. Outside of the Alloy and Magog, it's the old Charlton Comics characters. It's Captain Atom, it's Nightshade, it's the Peacemaker, it's Peter Cannon Thunderbolt. These are the same characters that Alan Moore used when he created Watchmen. So, right there at the beginning, the disaster that kicks off the events of Kingdom Come is the parasite tearing open Captain Atom's chest. Yes. So, it's a classic DC villain ripping open Dr. Manhattan's chest is what starts it. In a way, the Watchmen... This is where I start to think that Mark Waid's whole Neo-Silver Age outlook comes in, because the impetus for the entire story rests on Watchmen. Yeah. The Watchmen characters are literally the ones that push the ball rolling.
I didn't know that.
With a side note, Magog is supposed to be based on the Rob Liefeld character, Cable.
And Rob Liefeld himself, allegedly, is supposed to be a bit of a visual reference. Yeah, I don't know exactly how true that is, but I've always been... his costume is supposed to be a satanic... Like, Magog is...
He's got like a goat sort of horn style armor.
Yeah, he's supposed to be basically the Antichrist. Like, that's the role that he plays in the story.
I have to admit, when I was reading the book, I mistook him from Ares at first.
Okay, there you go.
In Revelations, I think they say the armies of Gog and Magog will march on like Israel or whatever. And so, they give this guy, they give him Cable's cybernetic arm, that stupid asterisk eye scar or whatever that Cable has.
The star.
Because if the Watchmen are the ones that started superheroes down the dark path that they've been on for about 10 years at the point that this was written, then Cable is kind of the epitome of them. He's toting these overlarge guns with bulging muscles and tons of pouches and coming from the future to kill people. It's really not something you would have seen even 20 years earlier. I think Cable kind of epitomizes the Dark Age, so it's very interesting that they take the first Dark Age characters and the epitome of them and they're the ones that start the story.
Yeah, that's a very, very good example, and like very well put. Because like as we said, we continue to say, this is Mark Waid and Alex Ross. They're very much challenging the shadow of the Dark Ages, or of, we'll call it revisionism, I suppose. Like where they have that ultra-violent time in comics in the 80s. And they're also kind of living in its shadow, kind of like dealing with the influence that it has on the story itself. Because the ideas, like obviously, in this incident, as Mark, pretty much almost outlaid the entire thing, the villain they're down battling is Parasite, and he rips open Captain Atom. It causes an atomic explosion, which destroys all of Kansas and a lot of the American Midwest, Iowa, Nebraska, all that. Pretty much destroys America's breadbasket and causes global famine because, stock collapses and everything. So a new depression pretty much spreads throughout the world instantly because of this incident. And this is the key point in the story which draws Superman's sympathy back to the world. I mean, he doesn't exactly show that in his initial reaction to Diana, but it clearly is what brings him back from, his exile. What do you guys think about that from a creative, writer standpoint? Like, using the destruction of Kansas through, everything about that situation. Is there anything you'd like to pick out about it that you'd like to talk about?
I think it's incredibly cool that that's what draws Superman out of his seclusion, that they just put it right in the heart of Kansas.
I mean, it's obviously very personal for him. Yeah.
And they come back to that, at the end and stuff, it's a big part of Superman's whole story cycle. The reason Superman retired was because the Joker
killed Lois.
Well, and everybody at the Daily Planet. He did a terrorist attack at the Daily Planet.
Right? 98 men and 1 woman.
Yeah, right. And Superman himself corrects the speaker, in the panels, you see Magog is the one who kills the Joker. Right, Superman wants to put the Joker through, he brings him, and you actually see that the Joker has been arrested. If you look at it, he's already in the hands of, the legal system, the justice part of truth, justice, in the American way. And then, the cops, they have Magog, and Magog just shoots the Joker, even though he's already in custody, and kills him, right? And the city, the people, the public side with Magog.
There's a poll, and 91% side with Magog, and only 8% side with Superman. The other 1% is indifferent or whatever.
Yes.
But it's even though he's legally arrested and he's put on trial, and Magog is I don't know how does the trial turn out again? He does kind of get off, I believe.
I don't know.
But clearly I believe he does.
He gets off.
Yeah, because by the end. Because obviously the public supports him, so any jury, I would assume, would ring him innocent. But it's
to show that Magog is a vigilante character, which is one of the things that's so thematic here. He doesn't give a shit about due process or the law or justice or anything like that. He's a hardcore vigilante Punisher style character. When Superman sees that the world, the hearts of the people that he is supposed to be protecting,
side with him.
Yeah, side with the guy. He's lost their hearts, so he leaves, and then Kansas itself gets fucked up, and that's what draws Superman back.
So that's
I think one point I'd like to make about that is I think that's also a plot point that has come to be reused. I know it was reused in the script for the early 2000s Batman vs Superman movie, and I'm pretty sure it was used in the Injustice series.
Injustice is practically Kingdom Come.
Yeah,
I mean, it is really similar.
And I'm, it could very well be in the Batman vs Superman movie, although I don't know that by any means. But the idea that Joker killing Lois is the impetus for Superman disconnecting from his humanity. Yeah. Clark Kent always kind of represents his humanity, and the Clark lifestyle, whenever you see his apartment, it's practically empty. Yeah, he's got a Superman robot in the closet. Simple, that's all he has. So his humanity has always been channeled through his life at the Daily Planet, and the Joker took that away from him, and when he killed all those people, Lois Lane and Jimmy Olsen and whatnot, and Perry White, he might as well have killed Clark Kent too. Yeah. I mean, Clark it happens multiple times where they call him Clark.
And he's Cal, yeah.
Yeah, and he's no, it's Cal, because he's completely given up the human half of his identity.
Yeah.
And I think that became kind of a plot point that has been used a couple times now, where they're the only person crazy enough to fuck with Superman is the Joker, and that if he were to do something that brutal to cross that line to kill Lois Lane, that would be what costs Superman his already somewhat fragile humanity and makes him a completely alien being.
And a god.
Yeah.
And that is where this Marvel's is from the ground up. You know what I mean? It's like you're looking up, and this story is very much from the top down. Like Superman is now a god, and that is his role. These beings are well above, like, they're not people with secret identities. They're not humans who secretly have powers. These are godly creatures, they're above, Dan,
did you have something?
Yeah, I think it's really cool the way that he deals with this strife. Like, first off, he's got to be incredibly pissed off that if anybody got to go and kill the Joker, it wasn't him in the first place. Like, he cares about the due process and everything, and he would have preferred for, like, the justice to go and be swung down upon him, whatever that may be. But to go and have that robbed from him, for him not to get processed the way he is supposed to be, just completely brings down the whole Earthling way of how we deal with shit over here.
Yeah.
But to go and prove that he's still one of us, when they go and they show him at the Fortress of Solitude, the way he deals with his strife is by planting things.
Yeah.
By giving life.
He wants to be a farmer. That's his, like, depression. That's him secluding himself with things that he's familiar with, is he recreates a Kansas farm in an artificial environment for, like, 10 years, Yeah, he's devotes himself to agriculture,
That like, even furthers, like, he's still a human because he's growing these things, and he's also a god simultaneously because it's his goal to give life.
Yeah. I would draw almost the direct opposite conclusion from that. That's more like there's a story about an ancient Egyptian goddess, and it's like in her grief she comes down to earth and like just waters the fields with blood. Like, that's an act of God, to go to the North Pole and just grow because your grief is so great that,
Interesting.
normal grieving processes are, it's one of those stories that you see throughout mythology where a god is grieving, and that's supposed to be on a completely
different level. Yeah. Well, my thoughts on the scene don't really pertain to the origin, like to that incident 10 years ago. It pertains to the bomb. Well, not the bomb. Captain Atom dying in the explosion in Kansas. Because I've always associated Kansas with, like we were saying, farming is an integral part of his character. Being that true blue American son who grew up from, a farmer in the American Midwest. I feel like the destruction of Kansas is a strong metaphor for the story's direction, away from that excess of violence and whatnot. Because, they have that whole huge fight there, and then it results in the ultimate act of violence, complete obliteration through nuclear destruction, which is the highest level of destruction we've able to conjure in human history. And obviously that's mirrored at the end of the story, but we'll get to that. I feel like it's a conflicting metaphor, because when I look at it, that's what I think. I think that's the story saying it's like a destruction of Superman's innocence in Kansas, but it's like reviling that type of excessive violence from the 80s by using a very destructive example of that. So it's kind of ironic, flipping over its tails, but I feel like the story contradicts itself a lot in its mission to be a more positive reconstructionist sort of look, like step away from the 80s and the destruction and like Dark Ages. It kind of tends to fall into the same tropes of the 80s.
And I'm not sure if that's on purpose or not. It's weird, like the story, and like you keep saying, we'll cover the whole thing. But at the end of it, the superheroes who are supposed to represent the gooder, truer, older type shit, wind up being pretty fucked up themselves. Yeah. And I'm not sure I don't want to call it poor writing because this is one of my favorite comics ever, but I'm not sure if that's supposed to it just sort of falls apart, and they don't really make a strong case for the golden age ethic.
I think, and I want to just, I'll talk more about this at the end, but I think that the idea was to put them through the exact rigors of a Watchmen type of scenario of Twilight of the Superheroes type situation, except to have the ultimate result be different. Okay. And I think that really if you contrast it with The Dark Knight Returns or with Watchmen, you can see the difference in the last decision that Superman makes is that he's put through the trials that all the Dark Age character would come through, but the Golden Age Superman reacts differently than Miracle Man or Dr. Manhattan or Superman of Dark Knight Returns.
So you can throw the same shit at two different generations, right?
Yeah.
And the classic generation fares better. Right. They have more fiber to them.
That's what I take away.
Okay, I got you.
I have a lot of ideas on that I will share at the end.
Yeah, I've got more than I want to say about that too, but it's at the end.
Because we've spent how long now going over like the first like 5 pages of this?
It's okay. We're only
set up.
We're only 35 minutes in.
All right, it's set up. It's set up. Yeah.
But as we continue, because I feel like the bulk of this conversation, even though we're a half hour in, will be about after we finish the conclusion of the story. So let's move forward. I think a good place to continue on from that point is Superman returns from his self-imposed exile. Norman McKay, is sent to Metropolis, and he watches Superman save a cable car falling while these reckless heroes endanger them. And he gathers League members and claims that he's going to start, policing heroes in a sort of way, having them join the League and educating them and kind of teaching them his ways of truth and justice and restoring order. So they start globetrotting, everything starts to kind of fall back in line with his mentality. He does approach Batman to offer this, obviously. He's one of his closest friends. He finds Batman in Gotham, which is pretty much under complete authoritarian rule over Batman, who has every street corner under camera and watch, and every hue is covered by robots, sentries.
Big freaky robots too, Fritz-Lang Metropolis robots. This is not a normal future. This is the future of the 1970s. It's definitely Alex Ross shit,
It does. It's the weird flying cars and the Jetsons sort of style, oddities.
Speaking of the 70s, his Bat robots are arresting Fat Albert in the gang.
That is true.
There's a lot of kick-ass little references. If you look at this panel by panel, you can't believe all the shit that he crams in here. Every time I read this, more shit pops out at me.
It is quite.
I didn't even know that was Fat Albert.
It does look like the red shirt. I can see it all.
Yeah.
I can remember because I read it yesterday, but it is quite interesting. And obviously, Batman, ever the staunch, individualist, is Superman, go suck your super dick, and I'm out of here. And
he sides with humanity.
Yeah.
He sees Superman's, assembling the gods to seize control of things as being a threat to humanity. Batman is no, I'm going to side with the street level people. I don't want any part of your super fascism or whatever he's scared of, which is kind of funny.
To be fair, he does have a valid point, because as Superman goes along, he's forced to realize that he can't coerce everyone in a nice way. If he can't coerce them in a nice way, he shoves them in an overflowing gulag that he makes, under Wonder Woman's little nudge in the shoulder.
And everyone praised Mark Miller when he came up with that idea, and 10 years later. Superhero gulag! Right. Now, idea 42! I stole from Mark Waid.
Yeah.
Now,
a lot of the parallels can be drawn to Civil War, a lot.
As far as other parallels, just in this bit, Superman is put in a very similar position that Miracle Man is in, where pretty much if he wants to make the world a better place, he's going to have to take a very hands-on active role in actually running the world.
Yeah.
And Batman is put in a very similar role that he's in The Dark Knight Returns, just on how this plays off a lot of the tropes of the Dark Age, of where it's almost an identical scene. Superman shows up to the Batcave and Batman's spin on it. I don't want any part of it. And of course, the one guy standing right there with him with that is Ollie Queen. And that's exactly paralleling the Dark Knight Returns, where Batman and Green Arrow are
best homies, because they're both they're street level heroes. They're human beings, and they very much embrace that side of their personality.
Right.
I'm tempted to call Green Arrow more different Batman.
Wait, what does that mean?
Batman with arrows.
We can't change all the names. Bird Planet, Captain Planet Man is already, that's gonna take enough effort to remember. I can't remember more different Batman. That's just, it's too.
He is more different Batman. He's Batman, except more different.
Are we just gonna say that about every street? I'll say that about Daredevil now. He's more different Batman.
I'll stab you.
No, he's Red Batman. Mark Waid actually called him that in in his most recent Daredevil run was Red Batman.
So if you ever bring up Daredevil, I don't know who that is.
He's Red Batman.
Red Batman.
Anyway, Brando.
Anyway, continuing forward. Jesus, where are we? Okay. I know in response to that, really quickly before we go on, one thing that I notate about that is somewhat interesting is that superheroes like Superman and all them going out and trying to control the situation that is kind of taking hold of the Earth is kind of oddly proactive, wouldn't you say? Like, heroes are typically like very reactionary to like the situations at hand, and this is them going out making an active change, which is very unsettling to the humans because they already feel like they really don't have any stake in their fate as far as what happens to them on this Earth. They've kind of already submitted to the subjugation of like all these heroes and the destruction that they cause. So
I guess it depends on who you ask, really. When you see Superman and the crew come back initially,
everyone's down.
How excited everybody is, and then everyone else who's like in the official building, they're like, "Fuck,
yeah,
back."
It's the United Nations.
The UN is pissed off.
It's the UN.
Yeah. The supposed leaders of the free world who don't really have any real power, they're upset about it. For obvious political reasons. But also on the hero level of things, the superhuman level, Batman allies himself with Lex Luthor and other prominently heroes.
The Mankind Liberation
Front. Mankind Liberation Front.
Who's like 7/10 old Batman villains who I don't know how they what is Catwoman doing in this super god future? What, she has a cat, she's rich, and she apparently married the Riddler.
Yes, right? I brought my friend Nigma.
Which is convenient because when they go around the table, he addresses and identifies everybody there for us, the reader, in the form of a question, like he's appearing on Jeopardy.
I also love that it's pretty apparent that Catwoman brought him for the specific purpose of just annoying the shit out of Luthor. Yeah. Just who's the most annoying person I can bring?
Right.
Eddie!
Right. Simmer down, Eddie.
There was that, and also you're introduced to the Batman quote-unquote wild card of the story, Captain Marvel, who is under a sort of zany, brainwashed state that Lex Luthor has put him under.
Brain worms.
Yeah, the worms.
Totally creepy.
Supposed to look like Mr. Mind a little bit. The Rathacon earworms.
Okay, so this is definitely Rathacon earworms. That has to be where they got that from, right?
Yeah, that and the fact that Captain Marvel's biggest villain was a worm.
Yeah,
caterpillar, whatever.
They mentioned
caterpillar wearing a radio. What the fuck?
It's funny that Sivana is the one that actually makes those worms.
And he doesn't appear in the story. They don't tell you, I don't think, where Sivana went.
I think they imply that he's dead.
Okay.
Interesting.
Okay. Probably Luthor ate him somehow, because this is a creepy fucking Lex Luthor. This is not...
Yeah, can we take a second to talk about Luthor?
Kingpin style, fat, old...
He really does look like the motherfucking Kingpin. He's got all that fucking Richard Nixon phlebitis shit going on.
I just remember the scene, he's smoking the cigar and someone, I don't know, Cobra or someone, probably maybe the king from the Royal Flush Gang, someone is but what about Superman? And he just loses it. He has a complete conniption, he will not touch me! Yeah. He will not touch me!
Yeah, he has a very creepy reaction to that.
And his face turns red and he looks and
I wish they would film just parts of this.
Yeah.
I know it's too much to ask to make a movie, but I want to see this Luthor on screen. Can you imagine that shit just gibbering, stuck under the collar of his
And he's getting a shave. I feel that is
shaving him with a straight razor.
That is literally the worst time to start freaking out and moving wildly as well. As well. But I guess it's also meant to show how under his control Billy is.
Yeah. He's wearing page boy clothes. I don't know how to describe it, but Billy is wearing
a weird, a tuxedo, and he's just kind of his bellboy,
it's weird.
Side piece.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Luthor's also orchestrating all this. He's purposely sending criminals to get captured by the
Justice League.
By the Justice Leagues, that they'll have this huge overfull prison camp that they don't know what to do with. Mm-hmm. And then he's got Captain Marvel under his wing to go break it up, and he's got Batman's whole faction kind of separated. Of course, if there's one guy that's kind of masterminding it, of course it's fucking Luthor. Yeah. If you're taking the view that this is a Superman story more than anyone else, probably the villain of the story is Lex Luthor. Even though he gets taken out of the picture in like issue 2 or 3,
yeah,
Luthor is the mechanic behind the heartache.
It would have worked if not for Luthor. Luthor's the one who poisoned the waters. You know, like they have the task set ahead of them of trying to fuck up all these crazy 90s 9 Inch Nails superheroes or whatever.
These belligerent, like Evanescent types.
I honestly expected Vandal Savage to take a little bit more forefront. Like, he's like one of those really big fucking global big picture guys. I would really expect for him to do something about it.
But all he does is strangle Luthor's secretary.
Which is priceless. I just had her trained. Not very well. I just picture H. John Benjamin voicing Vandal Savage. Not very well. Like,
oh, man. Well, as the plot progresses... please continue.
I just one more thing about Luthor, and that is... Never mind, completely forgot it. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. If it comes back to you, cut me off. But I was going to say that at this point in the story, we have all the players in motion, and as you mentioned, Luthor is starting to feed the Gulag intentionally to lead to his master plan. And obviously tensions continue until they mount to a head where there's a huge battle between the League and everyone who resists the League's rule. So there's a prison riot, I believe, at the Gulag, and there's a breakout, and Superman is at the New Oa. Yeah, they're all up there, they're all hanging out before it all goes down, and they're all fairly content planning their next move, and then that's when Norman McKay actually gets pulled out of the exposition side of things and into the physical plane. So we get this interesting quirk from the author, Mark Waid, of seeing that Norman is actually still existent. He's not like invulnerable or untouchable, that he's still, very much alive. He's not dead. He's not like an angel now or anything like that, or a ghost, but he's still involved in the story very immediately, and the Specters' warning still kind of carries some weight, even though it's kind of up to interpretation as to how much input that he really has by the end. But moving forward... Oh, you have something, Mark?
I just really want to say, it's like if in the Christmas Carol, if one of the characters had the ability to vibrate through the frequencies of reality.
If anyone could pull Scrooge out, they probably would have.
I also
probably beat the shit out of him.
But wait, Tiny Tim can actually vibrate the molecules of his body.
You fuck! You know what really sick? Just Speed Force. Anyway, we head back to the battle where the Gulag is having a prison break. The dangerous heroes and villains that have been stashed there are going out. Wonder Woman takes charge because she thinks Superman is being too hesitant about it. He's like last on the scene, I believe. Second to last on the scene. Third to last, I guess, actually. But she says that he's being hesitant. She needs to take charge. She thinks that the other heroes need a good example. And she goes, and she's... What?
No.
And she's somewhat overcompensating, in my opinion. But either way.
And he's decided that the best course of action at this point is to go to the Batcave and talk to Batman.
That is true. Yeah, he does go to Batman immediately and is like, come on, man, tell me about things.
There's a literal superhuman war, and his thing is like, let me hash it out with Bruce.
Yeah.
Like,
let's just talk it out. Because Bruce, on the flip side of things, has exposed Luthor, basically used him to find where Captain Marvel was hiding. Yeah. Because Captain Marvel was the only wild card in this entire scenario, which Batman deemed to be a necessary plight to kind of, expedite. So he finds Captain Marvel, discovers that there is the brainwashing going on, tries to assist him, doesn't really work out. Captain Marvel flies off in a huff. Billy doesn't really know what to do with himself.
It's important. Batman knows the entire time, or he suspects that Captain Marvel isn't actually Captain Marvel. What Luthor has is actually just an aged Billy.
Yeah.
He's not Captain Marvel, which is really fucking interesting, Yeah. The reason Batman, or Bruce, he's not really Batman, he's just fucking Bruce Wayne at this point, joins the whole Earth Defense Force was just to find out what the deal was with Captain Marvel. He just infiltrated the bad guys,
Just for that trip.
Yeah.
That was his only purpose there. So we head back to the battle. It's going out. What is the point? So after his confrontation with Bruce, the only thing that he really relegates out of that is that he kind of convinces Bruce to at least sympathize that the only thing that they want out of the situation is to prevent the loss of life, because that's what he kind of feels is their singular quintessential similarity that between the two of them. They have a lot of philosophical differences, but that is the one thing that's always kept them together as friends. So he kind of just clues him off about Captain Marvel, saying that situation is going to probably go haywire. Superman heads to the battle, believing that he's the only one. This is kind of semi-quoting Spectre, believing that he's the only one in the world that could prevent a superhuman war. He's wrong. Captain Marvel shows up and gives him a smackdown, basically.
Like a classic Superman Captain Marvel fight.
Yeah. And I feel like... Oh, go please, Mark. No. I was only going to say, I know Mark Waid is notoriously a big fan of the character of Captain Marvel, so I know he wanted to give that character a prominent role, and what better way to do it than let him whoop Superman's ass.
All hail to the big red cheese.
This is his finest moment.
They think, I think, like, people see that, like, this is Superman not acting like Superman, and I think a lot of people talk about that. Like, this doesn't seem like something traditional Superman would do, although in the end, the real Superman shines through.
Yeah.
But I think the same thing can be applied to Batman and Wonder Woman as well. Wonder Woman is literally an ambassador for peace, and she just wants to wipe them the fuck out.
She is warlike.
Yeah.
She is, I mean, she's very active and passionate and warlike. She's the war hawk of the story. She's constantly egging Superman towards, you need to seize control of the situation. She reminds me of fucking Wormtongue from the Lord of the Rings sometimes.
I mean, she does evoke, a lot of things. She's like, make the gulag, and, be, an official. And she's like also criticizing him on his inability to accept himself as a world leader.
Yes.
And as a symbol of hope for, like, the League and for the world. So she very much is always in his ear. That's a very good comparison.
And Batman, who's always wanted to kind of fight evil through fear and control his situation, is now the one fighting against control in the situation.
Yeah.
So really, all three members of the Trinity, and he when the superhuman war starts, he wants no part of it. He just wants them, pretty much the same thing Luthor wants. He just wants them to wipe each other out, and he wants to be inactive, which is the opposite of Batman.
It's un-Batman-like.
So in the battle scene, all three characters are kind of confronted with what they want to do. And Superman realizes he has to get back there and he has to save his people, because that's what Superman does, he saves people. Batman realizes he can't sit on the sidelines, him and his team have to go in, because that's what Batman does. Batman is the big scary guy that comes and saves you when no one else will. And
they intro him in a very interesting way, like where it says, like, if Superman doesn't do it, like, he'll need, like, assistance from on high or something, and that's when Batman is introduced into the battle.
I also like when Superman was trying to persuade him to come join, and he calls them the world's finest. It's a good moment.
We could be the world's finest. And I'm like, that was a very cute moment.
And Wonder Woman doesn't have her moment yet. At this point, she's still being brutal. I think that the next major thing that happens
is when she kills Von Bark.
Sure.
One of those, I believe so.
One of those neo-Nazi guys.
Yeah, she kills like some German dude. He's about to kill someone else.
He's about to crush Zatara, and Batman's like, you just crossed a fucking line. You know? Like,
and she's like, you have no room to judge me, and then they end up in the sky fighting each other.
Right. Which is important, that they're in the sky.
Because they see
the Blackhawks.
Which is so cool. Yeah. The fact that the UN is like, okay, we're up to the point where they're going to drop the bomb.
Yeah.
Are we doing that?
Yeah. I'll quickly say for you, maybe before you, because you're going to get into some sort of point, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Just to let the audience know really quickly, at this point in time, the UN, somewhere far away, is basically saying we're not going to let the fate of the world be decided on a single superhuman dispute somewhere in bubblefuck nowhere. Instead, let's get Red Robin to drop 3 nuclear bombs down there.
Was that Red Robin?
No, it's Blackhawk.
Okay, alright. I wasn't sure, maybe...
I wasn't sure if he was in the battle, so...
No, it's the Blackhawk Squadron.
Yeah, and I know there has to be new people wearing the jackets, because I assume... It's hard to tell, but anyway, the United Nations has a dude in a Blackhawks jacket, he's gonna drop... they call them not K-bombs.
No, no, not K-bombs, because I remember the K-bomb situation when
Kryptonite.
No, they weren't gonna drop Kryptonite, because Luthor... When they're doing the round table at the United Human, like a Mankind for Federation shit, whatever.
Mankind Liberation Front.
Thank you. Yeah. They're chilling out, and Luthor's like, why don't we drop some K-bombs on them? And they're like, Luthor's like, unfortunately, Kryptonite doesn't pack that punch anymore.
He's at the peak of his invulnerability.
Thank you, Dan. He's been soaking up the sun for like decades to the point where he's fucking like invincible, and Kryptonite doesn't bother him. nearly as much as it did in his youth. So.
I've always wondered if that was true.
But they decided to scrap the whole kryptonite aspect of the story very quickly.
Because, in my point of view, Luthor wants Superman to survive this. He just wants Superman to see his dreams burn. And so, those nuclear bombs, I think they mentioned, are specifically hardened to eliminate superhumans. Like, even most superhumans that be able to walk away from a nuclear bomb won't be able to walk away from it.
Yeah, there's some sort of, like, ultimate bombs. And they have some sort of force field projected around them?
Yeah, but Luthor, for whatever reason, makes sure the bombs aren't powerful enough to kill Superman.
Yeah.
And so I think that there might be an intent there. Maybe I'm making this up, maybe I'm not, but maybe there's an element of Luthor wants Superman to suffer. Luthor wants Superman to see the destruction.
You're reading a lot of the underlying possibilities because the literal dialogue does not give a whole lot to Luthor.
I know. I'm sorry.
No.
I'm a Luthor fan. You know that? As much as anyone can be a Luthor fan, I'm a Luthor fan.
And I definitely appreciate that view. All views are valid and all views are welcome. So, at that point in time, let me see where we are on the super. Just to recollect. So we're at the battle. We've just mentioned that the Blackhawks are coming. Superman is entrenched in battle with
Captain Marvel.
Batman has arrived, obviously, to
fighting Wonder Woman.
To assist Annie's, but that's turned into a fight with Wonder Woman. They recollect that there are Blackhawks coming. They take out 2 of them.
Yeah.
They managed to at least disarm 2 of the 3 nuclear bombs, which are headed for the superhero battle, but 1 is left. Neither of them can reach it in time, so Superman realizes that he's the only one who can do it, but he's locked in a deadlock with Captain Marvel. He can't get in there in time, so he... Please, Mark.
No, I just wanted to pause for a second to talk about the 3 bombs idea.
Okay, go ahead.
DC is frequently stated as having a trinity. And earlier I talked about how Batman and Superman had reached their turning points, but Wonder Woman hadn't. This is Wonder Woman's turning point. She's beating Batman at the point that we see in that combat when the Blackhawks show up. And she doesn't finish the combat, which is what we would have seen Wonder Woman to that point do.
Where she's turned away from that.
She turns away from the combat to fight the greater menace to save lives.
Yeah.
And so what you then have is Wonder Woman takes down one bomber, Batman takes down another.
There you go.
So the Trinity, there's one bomb for each one. Wonder Woman takes care of hers, Batman takes care of his.
Yeah.
But Superman can't take care of his because of Captain Marvel.
And because of the moral implications that he goes on in that monologue for.
Yeah, is this the point where he lets Billy decide?
This is the point, yeah. At that point, he's subdued Billy, he's basically choking his face.
Yeah.
And
he has him as Billy, right?
Yeah.
He broken him so that because Billy was saying Shazam to bring the lightning down, which would transform him, but was placing Superman in the way of the lightning.
And since the lightning is magic, it was like hurting Superman.
Like fuck,
it was really
took his cape, fucking burned his cape off, but he's got Billy, you know what I mean, by the face, and they have this beautiful dialogue. I wish I had it right in front of me, but like hands that could crush steel or something like that,
right on Billy's jaw,
around flesh and bone,
And Billy is bleeding around the ears. I'm not sure if that's to symbolize anything in particular, but he does say, "Listen harder than you've ever listened in your whole life."
Right.
Pretty much points him out and is like, "Look at all this crazy shit that's going on, man. And like we're going ham, and I can't make this decision." And also, this is where I feel difficulty explaining the situation because at the same time, in the parallel universe, Norman is also he's been taken to the situation to observe. Obviously, that's how we see all this with the Spectre, and the Spectre, I believe, urges him to judge.
I think that comes later.
It's around a similar point. I don't know if that's the exact thing that's happening, but there's also drama with Norman and the Spectre at the same time.
Yeah.
And the Spectre appears literally gigantic.
Yeah, huge.
And that's the point at which you realize that the Spectre is the most powerful comic book character, really. Or at least hero.
Did we step over the moment where, like, Shazam, like the wizard and all them are chilling out in space?
Yeah, we did.
Okay, not important. We'll deal with it later.
Weird as fuck.
But ultimately, the Spectre could have stopped all this from day one.
Yeah.
I mean, he arm wrestled the Anti-Monitor. He's unbelievably powerful. He dwarfs Superman, Captain Marvel, nuclear bombs, what have you. He can stop all this any second he wants. But for some reason, he's not intervening. And that's because he's the agent of God's vengeance. He's put to cast judgments and to carry them out.
Yeah.
And what he's trying to decide is whether or not nuclear annihilation is punishment that fits the crime for the superheroes for their being above everybody. And he hasn't been a human for so long. He hasn't been a human since the 1940s when he was Jim Cargan. That he doesn't know
what it feels like anymore.
Yeah, that's why he's got Norman. Norman is his human eyes on the ground.
Yeah.
Like, from their perspective, you choose.
That's
which is really fucking cool because Superman makes Billy, who's half human and half superhuman, you know what I mean? Who's sort of caught between worlds, you know? He's the one who has to decide about the third bomb, you know? Yeah.
Because he kind of like relegates him like sort of an ultimatum, like either you let us run rampant and obviously the world will suffer in a numerous amount of ways, choose us as superhumans, or choose humanity and let the bomb hit us and or stop me. And I think as it were, because he flies off and he's like, I'm gonna go stop the bomb because I can do that easy, but it's not my choice to make. You know, this is your choice.
What's kind of cool about that? He said that it's Batman's bomb, Wonder Woman's bomb, and Superman's bomb. But actually, in fact, it becomes Captain Marvel's bomb. I just thought that was kind of cool.
That is cool.
That he's actually like the original.
It's a climactic moment,
Trinity, really. He's the original Soups.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he is in his own way, but...
And I think it's also important because, like I've been saying a bunch of times, this is a specific reaction to the Alan Moore style of storytelling, the Alan Moore 80s style of storytelling.
Yeah.
And Captain Marvel is the basis of Miracle Man. And Miracle Man was Alan Moore's first foray into this whole thing. And I talked to Jim about this a while ago and how weird that is because in that, basically, Miracle Man gives up on his Mickey Moran human lifestyle entirely and decides to be a god and to reshape the earth in his image and to rule, more or less. In kind of a reaction to that, in the way that the Neo Silver, Neo Golden Age here is different, and that I say that what makes it different isn't that the situations are different, the difference is what the heroes do in the end is the right thing. Billy makes the opposite decision.
So Captain Miracle Man stops saying Komoda. He says Komoda for the last time. His changing word, right?
Yeah.
Stops saying it, and Billy goes out saying Shazam.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I think it was a purposeful thing to have the Miracle Man analog.
That's amazing.
Make the opposite decision and to have it be his human rather than his superhuman self that makes that call.
Yeah, so he ceases to exist, but the world continues to in its own way. Yeah,
it's almost a rallying call like against that Alan Moore style of writing from the 80s. So the ultimate. It's like arguably the most ultimate moment in the story where Billy decides to. I mean, obviously the bomb still goes off and it kills almost all the heroes there.
Yeah.
Besides Superman, obviously, because he's Superman and
Green Lantern, Dr. Fate.
There's a handful of them, and it's odd because they're shielded by the Green Lantern, Dr. Fate, and I think Jade.
Yeah, Jade probably helps that as well.
Yeah.
They all contribute to a big shield that defends a select amount of heroes that manage to survive the hero holocaust, if you will.
But most of them just go down.
Yeah. Just wondering, you guys, you think it's kind of weird that our point of view character doesn't really give two fucks about what Deadman says about the Spectre?
Yeah, it is strange.
Deadman doesn't have, like, the most insightful opinion.
Yeah, but, like, if you have the Spectre who literally comes out of nowhere to go and talk to you, and then another guy who also comes out of nowhere to be like, you know what? I'm kind of an okay dude. What's up? I'm dead. By the way, that Spectre dude has been fucking right in the head for, like, years. So just watch out, man. Just like a word of caution.
The point that I always liked about this, and eventually they would retcon this to be Earth 22 or something. I think at the time it came out, it was just supposed to be a possible alternate.
Yes, in Elseworlds, it was its own complete separate universe. Yeah.
But the important thing about the Spectre is there's only one Spectre. His original host, Jim Cargan, came from Earth 2, but the Spectre of the 1970s very frequently operated on Earth 1.
He said 3 hosts in total, right?
Yeah, but at this point in the 90s, Cargan was the only host. So what I think is kind of strange is the Spectre was supposed to be the same Spectre across all the multiverse.
Okay, like his Dark Side or something like that. There's only one.
Right.
Yeah,
his human host had come from Earth 2, but he was by no means limited to Earth 2.
Okay.
And in the 1940s, he was portrayed as kind of just another superhero member of the Justice Society, whatever. Yeah. By the 70s, they made him into like this hardcore Wrath of God type. Mm-hmm. And, you know, by the 80s, he was cosmic wrestling with Anti-Monitor type stuff. So where I think this is important is that this could actually be the mainstream Spectre.
Okay.
Because what Deadman says about him holds true across the continuities that stood then, is that the Spectre, the longer he's dead, because he's been dead since the 40s, like 1942, since he's been dead, that the longer he's dead, the less human he seems.
Because he's slowly forgetting it, though.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that's kind of a key point to remember, is that this might not even be a different alternate universe take on the Spectre. This is just the Spectre.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
You think that's kind of like a Dr. Manhattan Silk Spectre angle to this? Where Silk Spectre, or, you know, our point of view character, is the one that goes and brings the humanizing factor to Manhattan to go and bring the judgment down upon people.
Yeah, it's
extremely similar relationship. Yeah.
Just slightly fewer, like, group sex moments.
Not even a one. As a matter of fact, not even a one, which is the clearest Alan Moore slight in the entire thing. No worries. Yeah.
Let's finish up the story so we can at least talk about our big ideas of overall theme and messages and whatnot. Superman is furious over the UN's decision. He flies there immediately, lifts the roof up, and is pretty much ready to bring the roof down.
Yeah. Which is like the least Supermanly thing possible.
Absolutely.
Which is so strange. It's where I get a little bit confused about what the story is trying to tell me. You know, about like
the image of Samson in the temple there.
Okay.
Trying to bring down the roof with his strength.
Oh shit. Okay. All right. Okay.
But instead, he decides to step away from that. Because
Norman, I believe, enters his body. I believe this is the moment
Norman almost like physically possesses him.
The Spectre, in the same way the Spectre enters a human, or Deadman can enter a human host or something like that, there's a sequence where Superman begins to say something in a dialogue bubble, and then you see Norman's internal monologue dialogue box is like the middle paragraph, and then there's a second word bubble coming from Superman, which is the third part of his speech, right? And they complete one another's thoughts. And Norman and Superman, I believe, are standing right next to each other. And it's as though, it doesn't really say it, but it is as though Norman is speaking through Superman. And this is the way in which the Spectre has a human being decide the fate of the world. Because this would be the moment where Superman sees his power. Yeah. He crushes the UN, you know what I mean?
And just kind of takes control.
There you go.
I was going to say, in those moments that you were mentioning, I don't remember it in those climactic moments at the very end, but when he wants Billy to decide, I remember that very clearly. Norman is portrayed directly right in between Billy, Superman, and Norman is thinking a thought. Superman completes the next sentence.
There you go.
And then they pretty much format exactly how you mentioned it. So I felt like I was feeling strange, because if you read just Superman's speech bubbles, they're grammatically retarded. It's to the I'm not God, it doesn't make sense. You know, you need Norman's speech bubbles to make sense of it all. So I was thinking
that might be the moment where that happens.
Yeah, I was
I might have the story even a little bit confused.
No, that's fine. Yeah, they're definitely interacting on some level with each other
in the UN scene. I think one of the important things is ostensibly it's played that Superman, while he might be being possessed on a spectral level. Overtly, it's just portrayed as the Spectre makes Norman real for a second, and Norman talks to Superman.
Yeah.
And the important thing is, Norman doesn't call him Superman or Cal. He calls him Clark. And for once, Superman doesn't then say, it's Cal now, or whatever. He just
accepts it. Yeah.
He lowers his head. And it's for the first time in Kingdom Come, Clark is back in the driver's seat.
There you go.
And that's right back to the Richard Donner Superman of, where Clark Kent is the moral center of Superman.
There you go.
Norman if Clark is the human part of Superman that hasn't been present since Lois died, Norman reminds him of that. Superman couldn't make that decision that Billy Batson made because he had no human side.
Right.
By the time of the UN, Norman reminds him of his
all
human side.
Sure.
Of being Clark.
There you go.
And since he lived in both worlds too, to an extent, it's Clark that makes that decision not to kill them.
Yeah, so he honors the decision that Norman is kind of inflicting on him, and the decision that Captain Marvel made himself.
Yes.
So he decides not to kill them all, and they have a nice scene where they all unmask and they basically vow to not live above or like abstaining humans, but just to live amongst them and to cooperate with them, to use their powers for like the betterment of mankind.
Which is sort of the conclusion of the
That is what the story, I feel like this whole story has been building up towards that moment. There's a few interviews with Alex Ross from '97 where he was interviewed about this story, and I can't remember the quote exactly, but he very much admits that the entire story was building towards blurring the line between superhuman and human, that there is no differential between the two of them anymore, that, in the beginning this story is struck forward by a superhuman act of destruction where Captain Madam blows up, but by the end we see that humans are equally impressive and equally destructive by the end, killing dozens of heroes with their own man-made human bombs.
I see.
Yeah.
I see. So neither side was really morally perfect.
Now both sides need to be respected and regulated and cooperate with each other. Like they both need each other in respect. That's what I feel like the story was building towards, a blurring of the line between human and superhuman, and a new unified centralistic life on Earth.
Compromise, sort of, which is it's a little peculiar. The story seems to start out with the conflict is supposed to be like, the old guys are good and the New Jack guys are punks and they're bad and they're no good, and Superman's going to come and rein them in and fix everything, and that's what the fight is going to be.
And then it kind of takes a lot of turns from that.
Yeah,
I say that the story is building towards that point of superhuman and human equality. That's like the narrative conclusion, but I feel like the underlying themes of this book still attack the real world issues of the superhero genre at the time. I'll get into that once we really finish and wrap up everything about the plot. But is there anything you guys wanted to say, Dan or Mark?
About this part?
About Superman refuting. I mean, I feel like you already said everything about that.
I said what I had.
I mean, basically after that, there's not much else. He does use Captain Marvel's cape to dispense a flag.
Yeah. New flag of the UN.
New flag of
wonderful.
Very beautiful.
A symbol of wisdom.
Yes.
There you go. There you go.
I mean, it was his choice. His choice will echo their choices for the rest of the time, hopefully.
I didn't think of that, but that's probably exactly what that is. Yeah, the wisdom of Solomon or whatever. This was, Billy's decision once he was.
That's why he was bleeding from the ears. It was killing the mind worms that Luther had put in his ears.
Thank you.
That just occurred to me.
Thank you.
It was the wisdom of Solomon finally overriding Mr. Mind, and
his eyes were glowing. Superman's red during that scene. I don't know if that was indicative of
maybe he was heat visioning them out.
This is the fucking classic thing. Superman's about to do something fucked up. His eyes are glowing red, and that crazy laser vision's about to pop out. And he's just I could let this go.
So after the UN scene, they kind of have a reconciliation.
Yeah, they all do. You mean the epilogue?
No, I'm not quite to that yet.
I would say Norman has a reconciliation definitely with his faith.
Yeah, and Superman goes back to farming.
They all it's very interesting
real
what the
farming
roles
now.
become. Batman becomes a doctor.
Yeah.
You see him
Change
as
the black
Bruce,
for the white.
Yeah, he does indeed. That's what his father did.
Yes.
Thomas Wayne was a doctor. You see Wonder Woman reconciling with the Amazons, you know what I mean? She returns, and now she's taking care of basically all the bad guys who were locked up at the Gulag who survived.
Yeah, she's
are now
training
on
them.
Paradise Island being rehabilitated, right? So she's taken on sort of
like a mentor sort of role.
Yes,
in a lot of respects.
And Superman
she's literally crowned queen at the end, like
there you
her
go.
mother.
So she takes on her mother's role. Okay, and Superman becomes a super farmer. He returns to Kansas and starts to has a plow attached to him, and he's fucking
plowing a mile at a time, and he somehow deradiated all of the Midwest.
Yeah,
somehow.
I think he says that the ray helped him or something.
Yeah, somehow he manages to remove all the radiation from Kansas, makes it into an inhabitable land again, hand plants a massive memorial for all the dead in Kansas, and the million dead in Kansas, and then the dozens dead from the superhuman battle, and then continues on, and then obviously there's that little moment where of compassion where Diana shows up, gives him the glasses, finally kind of capping off his return to human aspect.
Yes. That was one of my favorite moments of the entire book.
It is
between the two moments, when he gets the glasses and he finally goes and he shows up. I read this for the first time. This is my first read through. So when I saw that part, and when I saw the part earlier where Captain Marvel goes and he sacrifices himself, when he literally is being held by the mouth, and the tears are coming out, and a little bubble comes up, the tears speak for him. And you feel that emotion. It's just fucking ridiculous and out of this world the way everything's portrayed. Just the intensity and veracity of how he's able to go and sacrifice, and then what it means to go and be human again after that. It's a fucking beautiful thing.
It's an incredibly sentimental story. All through it, there's so many moments that just punch you right in the heart. It's incredible.
Just looking over Dan's shoulder at the scene here where where Clark puts on the glasses for the first time. First thing he does when he has the glasses on his face is looks up in the sky. Literally, look up in the sky. It's showing the humanity of Clark. I really like that.
It's wonderful.
I don't know how many creative liberties the audiobook you had posted for us had.
Quite a few.
Yeah, because in that moment where she calls him Clark at the end and he doesn't really take issue with it, in the audiobook they add obviously a lot of dialogue to give visual cues, but it's she says, did she say Cal in there? Or did she say Clark?
She starts out with Cal, and then at the end when she leaves.
Which is a reverse of their original meeting earlier in the story.
In the audiobook, just as a fun fact, she says Cal, he corrects her and says, it's Clark. And she's like, but I thought, and he's like, it's always been Clark for those who've always been closest to me, crap like that.
Okay.
So I feel like he always reconciled that deep down, he's always his primary identity will be Clark. As opposed to Cal, because that's where he began and that's where he'll end. And that's the end of the story in its form before the epilogue. Norman McKay returns to life. The Spectre reveals his identity as the previous conscious he was, and kind of restores his faith that he's always to be a good preacher and preach joy and hope.
He's giving a happy sermon at the end instead of the scary, fucked up sermon that
the doom one
spooks everybody in the beginning.
Fire and brimstone.
Yeah. So then we enter the epilogue.
Which, that wasn't included in the original comics. I was surprised to find out because it's actually my favorite scene in the entire comic.
Wonderful, and it seems so necessary.
Yeah.
And like you, I was not aware that it was a later edition.
Only in every... it's included in every collected edition.
Yeah.
Ever, because it's a very, iconic piece now.
Yeah.
But at the time, no, it was included. But it's an interesting piece. It takes place in that restaurant, which we see earlier in the story, Planet Krypton. Which is obviously modeled in many extent to Planet Hollywood.
There's tchotchkes on the walls. It's very fun to look at.
Yeah. There's tons of hero memorabilia. Everyone, all the employees are dressed up as heroes. They're all acting very cockney and weird. And Superman has arranged a meeting with Batman and Wonder Woman there. That place in itself, the locale, I feel like is symbolic of the new era going forward in comics, the not 90s, a revolt against the 80s, but towards the future of implementing the joy of the Silver Age back into things. Because in that restaurant, all of DC's universe mingles effortlessly without any constraints or without any of the ubermensch violence and whatnot. So I think the locale's an interesting spot. But yeah, we go into there. He's invited Batman, who's obviously uncomfortable. I don't know why in this new world, which they would probably be celebrities, I think, to some dimension.
Yeah.
But whatever. They're hanging out in there. Superman and Diana announce to Batman that they're having a baby. And Batman...
No, they don't.
Well, Batman deduces it.
World's greatest detective figures it out on his own.
Because I'm sure he figured it out for his own.
Diana, you sure are bloating up.
Yeah.
He calls her fat.
Yeah.
He says you got fat cheeks for a golem.
Yeah. He calls her fat, figures out she's pregnant. She asks Batman to be the child's godfather. Superman's surprised, and he does it. Obviously, symbolically healing their relationship, and it ends on a very optimistic note where they all step out and dream of the future of what this child could bring.
I think that there are a few interesting points in there. First is all the TV characters. They have a Superman that, as Dan was just putting out, looks like Dean Cain in the beginning. And they have a Batgirl that looks like Yvonne Craig. And they have Victor Buono, who played King Tut on the wall.
I just thought it was just King Tut.
Yeah, no.
Just like...
No, it's like... It's Victor Buono or whatever.
There are so many fetishy throwouts to TV shit throughout this entire thing, man. When they build the Gulag, it looks like the Legion of Doom's headquarters.
Yeah.
From...
Super Friends.
Yeah, Super Friends. Like, I know Alex Ross is a huge hard-on for the Super Friends. Like, the cartoon. You know, all that shit is peppered in here like crazy.
The other thing that I wanted to mention is where it kind of takes its influences from, in that first you see their waitress is dressed as Robin, and she looks like Carrie Kelly from Batman The Dark Knight Returns. That's kind of, I think, supposed to be showing some of the
it's
parallels between the story.
It's supposed to be ironic.
Yeah, no, it's reminding you. It's saying, hey, remember this other story. Hey, remember this other story. Look at how differently this one ended.
Yeah.
This isn't Batman and Superman fighting till one's a bloody mess and the other has a heart attack. This is them realizing at the last possible moment that they have to work together, come to something greater. So by showing her, they're bringing your attention to that other story, and once again hammering home that contrast with the earlier Frank Miller type stories. The other cameo is at the end you see Norman and the Spectre are having lunch there, and sitting next to them is Phil from Marvels.
Okay, yeah.
The main character of Marvels. And I think that's their way of just giving a nod to Kurt Busiek and Alex Ross's previous collaboration there, that of saying, yeah, this is kind of the same thing except applied to DC, where we take the average man and look at DC as having this long history. Also, Uncle Sam is there with him. I don't know why that matters, though.
Alex Ross did a wonderful Uncle Sam. That's Alex Ross's Uncle Sam, too. It's not very well known, but it's absolutely fantastic. And it's barely a superhero comic at all. They take the DC character of Uncle Sam and have, like, Wonder Woman's mom yell at him because she's democracy, and they fight each other. It's awesome. Yeah.
I really like when they're, like, kind of toasting each other, have the glasses in their hand, that they have, like, Captain Marvel glasses in their hand.
Yeah.
And the last thing you see as they're walking out the door is they have like comic books hung on the wall, like first appearance of Captain Marvel and the Sandman's old gear, because Sandman and Captain Marvel both played key roles in the story. But then the very last thing you see is the first issue of Fun Comics, which was the very first comic DC ever published in 1935.
Yeah.
Like, if Kingdom Come had to serve as an epilogue to DC Comics as a whole, if they had decided to use this as an event to close out their line in 96, it would have succeeded in that purpose because of the symmetry. Yeah. Because the last image is literally DC's first image.
I agree with you completely. That's precisely what it is. And that's what the story, I think, is supposed to be. It's supposed to be like, it's like, I'm not saying breaking ground here, but it's the Ragnarok of the DC universe. It's not the last comic ever published, but this is the story of how it all wraps up. Just like, you know, in like Norse mythology and stuff like that, and a lot of mythologies, you have the story of how the gods will end, how their story will end, but that doesn't mean they're not here.
And I think that's why there are so many of those new heroes are supposed to be German Ubermensch, Nazi-ish types. Yeah. Is because there's supposed to be something Wagnerian about it. Like Wagnerian, like there's just something...
Twilight of the superheroes is Wagner. Twilight of the
there's
gods.
just something Sturm und Drang to this story.
And his name is Swastika, apparently.
It really shows through, I think. I really see this because, with the exception of Kurt Busiek, Mark Waid, more than any other author, with his refreshing takes on The Flash and the Justice League, in conjunction with Grant Morrison, and Fantastic Four, all the way through 52, and his take on Daredevil and Superman and a bunch of others. He's really managed to kind of show a fondness for the history of superheroes, for the legacy, and that's one of the things that I really enjoy about superhero comics, is that they don't feel new, is that they feel like there's this history to them, that there's...
And this is the granddaddy of that.
Yeah.
This is, it's an Elseworld, so it takes place in its own thing. They had the liberty of showing you an unbroken DC Comics universe. This is a world where there had never been a crisis. There was never any continuity reboot. They used their own versions of everything. But if you look, everybody showed up for this one. Everything is accounted for. And it's unbelievable.
I think that's why they used the Golden Age versions of characters like Green Lantern or the Ray, or in the case of the Flash, had one that looked like the Golden Age version. Yeah. People say it's a Neo Silver Age work, but really it's more of a Neo Golden Age work. where it's applying.
I feel like it's the only one of its kind.
Yeah, it's applying the sensibilities of the 1940s superheroes to the situations and the realism of 1980s superheroes.
Yeah.
And it ushered in a new age. Yeah, I know Astro City had already started and Marvel's had already started. That's why I say Kurt Busiek gets more credit than Mark Waid. Mm-hmm. And Alan Moore was about to reinvent himself with Supreme and Tom Strong and stuff. Grant Morrison was going to reboot JLA. That was all coming in the next year or so. Mm-hmm. But this, I think, was the equivalent to the way Watchmen ushered in the Dark Age as being the defining story of that period.
Yeah.
I think that Kingdom Come has the same kind of effect. I think that's why there are so many call-outs to Moore and Morrison, the same way, or Moore and Miller, I mean. The same way Moore and Miller make reference to and, kind of almost slap you in the face with, this is what the Silver Age was like, this is what the Silver Age was like, this is how different we are. I think that this does the same thing. It grabs you by the neck and says, look at this Miracle Man illusion, look at this Dark Knight Returns illusion, look at this Watchmen illusion, and then see how it comes out differently. See how the main characters walk out with smiles on their face. Yeah. It might as well have ended with a wink to the audience the same way the old 1950s Superman did.
Yeah, right. It does challenge like the 80s comics with like that unbridled like happiness of like the golden age.
You see some fucked up shit. Like, it's a nuclear holocaust.
Yeah,
and it ends with a baby being born, and Batman gets to be, the Godfather. It's wonderful. Yeah.
Well, I think we pretty much wrapped up the entirety of it. Is there any final thoughts that you guys wanted to chug out before we head off?
Just in terms of the story?
Absolutely. Anything else you wanted to say, comment on?
I kind of like the way that this comic kind of questions you the entire time. How do you feel? What it's asking you, because you have your point of view character, and he has to go and question the Spectre himself. And, referring to all of those earlier books, a lot of them kind of tell you, is like, oh, this is how you feel, this is how it's going to fucking go. This is, like, the definitive thing. Batman does his fucking thing because Batman is always right, and he just fucking makes everything for the best because he knows what's going to be the best. But in this particular story, it makes you kind of question the entire time, like, what do I feel? Do I really think that eliminating these superheroes is really going to change anything? Who's really on the right side,
Yeah.
And
that's absolutely right.
It does leave a lot to interpretation because, like, even in the epilogue, we don't see this new society they built, this new supposed utopia with, like, humans and superhumans coexisting. It's all left, I think, purposely vague.
It's not utopia. That's the thing. All those Dark Age works, they end with the ultimate moral of humanity is inherently corrupt. Superhumanity needs to take the reins. In Miracle Man, I already mentioned, it's Miracle Man literally taking control of society. In The Dark Knight Returns, Batman knows what's best for Gotham. Right. He has his Sons of Batman, and no matter what the law says, no matter what the people think, no matter anything,
it's an argument in favor of fascism.
Yeah, he's Batman, and that's what's right. And in Watchmen, the humans are just going to kill themselves in this never-ending cycle of cold nuclear war, and Ozymandias has to step in and do what's right.
Yeah.
And Dr. Manhattan confirms that what he does is right by stopping Rorschach from exposing him. And so the ultimate takeaway from your Dark Age story is that the superhuman is right. Is that, like, almost this crypto-fascistic need to just say humanity is corrupt, superhumanity is correct. The only way we'll get a utopia or anything better is by doing what the superhumans tell us.
Right.
And Kingdom Come says, no, the superhumans and humans work together. Neither is any better than the other. One's a superhuman atom bomb, the other's a human atom bomb. The superhumans do a lot of evil in the story, but so do the humans, like Lex Luthor. And there's really that idea that, you know what, nobody's a bad guy here. No one sets out with the intention of being a bad guy, which I think has some real world relevance, unless, with the exception of some complete psychopaths. For the most part, no one's like, yeah, I'm just really going to do whatever's terrible, unless I've dated you. And so for the most part, it's people set out with the goal of doing what they think is right. And I think that holds true for everyone in this story. Superman, Luthor, Batman, Wonder Woman, the UN. Everybody's just doing what they think is right. Even Magog.
Yeah.
Magog is repentant.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorite parts of the entire story is Magog being repentant in the sense where, Superman says, like, you must be happy that you won.
He must be proud.
Yeah, you must be proud.
Yeah,
and he says, crazy. Like, I can't believe you failed me. Why did you let me win?
Yeah.
Why did you take off? Now they look to me, and I'm nothing compared to you. You know?
And I think that's a really important difference. That's what really highlights how different this is.
It's an excellent summary.
Yeah.
That's very, very excellent.
I like how they kind of preface it with, like, you were the man of tomorrow, now you're, like, the man of the past.
Yeah.
And then it's back to, like, you still are the man of tomorrow. Like, that is extremely powerful shit there. I thoroughly enjoy that. We can go look to the future and throw away the past and go forward with ourselves.
Jim, anything from you?
Oh, quite a bit.
Please.
We kind of skipped past it a little bit. It's just one fun thing I found out myself, a little flashback. But
ding ding.
When we were talking about the bomb falling, when the UN uses the Black Hawks to drop the bomb and blow up the Gulag and all that stuff. The Secretary General of the New United Nations or whatever it is, right? His name is like Secretary General Wormwood, something like that.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah.
It's spelled with a Y, and I always thought that was fucking weird. Like, what the fuck kind of a name is that? Wormwood. And I looked it up, and they use all these slightly altered quotations from Revelations throughout Kingdom Come. They're making constant reference to Revelations. Wormwood in Revelations is a star that falls to Earth.
Just like the prophecy in the beginning of the story.
Yeah. And in Revelation, it's kind of cryptic. Like, there's different interpretations of it from what I've read. But Wormwood is a star that falls to Earth and poisons 1/3 of all the waters.
Yeah.
It's very strange, but it's like it's this thing that comes down. It's either a star or an angel. And in the story, Mr. Wormwood drops fucking a nuclear bomb, and the implication being nuclear disaster. I thought that was really cool.
To tie an additional point onto that, Chernobyl accident, the forest around there, its English translation would be wormwood.
No shit.
So a lot of what do they call it? Eschatologists nowadays associate the phrase wormwood with radiation because of the Chernobyl connection. I think it's called the Red Forest now, but that's what it was in the day. So the connection of linking wormwood to radiation is a Chernobyl reference.
That's fucking awesome. That's cool as shit. Oh, wow. There's so much shit in this. You could analyze this book, like, day in, day out. Reading this was probably, like, the 7th time I've been through it in preparation for this podcast, and I noticed all kinds of shit that I had not seen before. It happens every single time I read it. I mean, the characters in it. The background characters, right?
Yeah.
Tell the story of how the world, the continuity, if you want to call it that, occurred in this pocket universe. Like, they make reference to some character named Ibn, who's supposed to be Batman's son, right?
Yeah.
Which is basically what Damien.
Yeah.
It's implied, that he had a child with Talia, who is now his son, Red Robin I didn't even figure out that was Dick Grayson for a couple reads. They got this Starfire-like character running around.
Yeah.
She's not Starfire.
But she has the similar features, the eyes,
she's
the hair.
Dick and Corey's kid.
There you go.
Yeah.
And that's absolutely
Nightfire.
wonderful.
Night, thank you. I knew her name.
And just as far as other new characters that were introduced in this, Zatara, the
male,
the male Zatara was introduced in this. Zatara 2, I suppose. There was another big one, but I'm forgetting it now.
Kid Flash 2?
Oh yeah, Irie West
Yeah.
is introduced in this.
There's a couple Marvel family characters in the background, which is very interesting to me. There's like one or two. One of them I think is supposed to be Captain Marvel Jr., whatever the fuck his name is. You know,
Freddie Freeman.
There you go. Hey, thank you.
Always got it down.
Yeah. There's some of the original characters in this are totally interesting and unique. I wish that they would get their own books or something. Like, there's one dude who's just a fucking castle with legs. I don't know what his deal is. He gets, like, tipped over or something.
Yeah, what was he? Like, Steeple or something. Like, he had, like, Steeplejack or something. He had some cool name.
I mean, like, some of the descendant characters sort of help to explain who the main characters are.
Yeah.
Like, the fact that Jade is there tells you that this is Alan Scott Green Lantern and not Hal Jordan Green Lantern. I mean, you wonder, Green Lantern's structure that's in orbit is called New Oa, which makes you wonder where the fuck is Oa. Yeah. What happened to Hal in this? So you have images of him and stuff like that, but the only link you have to, like, the spacefaring Green Lantern mythology is that you see Ganthet, like, real quick, you know?
And Ganthet has, like, maybe 2 lines of dialogue.
There you go.
Yeah, so...
Yeah.
If you guys ever think it's kind of weird that, like, Atlanteans and Amazonians are, like, not even really considered humans.
Well, they are.
Like, they're not, like, really lumped into the population at all. Whenever we're talking about humans, even though they're, like, superior humans to us, like, they just never lump them in. I mean, they have, like, the one scene with the Aquaman.
Go down and visit Arthur.
Great.
Alex Ross got to have his day with Aquaman later with Justice. That came a little bit later, and I love Justice just as much as Kingdom Come, but you know that he wanted to play around with, like, Super Friends Aquaman in this, you know?
And instead he went with the King Arthur kinda.
Which is totally cool to see.
Yeah.
It's totally cool to see.
That probably was Mark Waid ringing him in. We're like, look, we can't focus on this right now.
I mean, as far as scenes that weren't included in the original but are in the collected edition, the Orion scene, where you see Orion has become Darkseid.
Yeah.
That he, like, tried to hold free elections, but it didn't turn out. And so
they addressed a lot of different issues in the collected edition, like the power cosmic, like, shifting and balance and stuff like that, and it gets pretty wild. This story could be analyzed like 6 ways to Sunday, but what, you guys, please finish up.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Jim just brought up the idea that, like, that you see the end of character arcs. Like, the Weather Wizard and Captain Cold are working at a bar. That's perfect. Like, that they just wrapped up their supervillainy career and were like, yeah, let's start a bar for superfolk.
Like, a professional athlete would, like, open up, like, a car dealership, you know? What's the natural conclusion of all this shit? Solomon Grundy is a bouncer at the bar. He's wearing...
Well, at least they ended up somewhere. Like, God knows what the hell, like, Riddler and all them are doing besides, like, hanging out with Luthor. But now they're obviously going to be at, like, Batman's, like, Happy Fun Hospital, so.
Which he has, that's how they wrap up Luthor's story, right?
Yeah,
he's there with
Luthor's here,
hanging out with his collar.
Broke into the Batcave a couple times.
Carter trying to hack the computer, right?
Which is funny because, like, his hospital's in Wayne Manor.
Right.
And it reminds me of Doc Savage almost, where he would take, like, his villains upstate and have them, like, reprogrammed and just by being nice to them for a long time. And, like, it's kind of got that kind of overtone to it where they're just trying to fix them by helping them.
Yeah.
I mean, the scene of the villains on Paradise Island where they, like, don't know how to behave is, like, you know.
Yeah.
It's humorous.
Yeah.
One that's, like, smacking the other. I forget exactly which character it is, but you get it's so cool how it implies this shit, but, you know, the one, you don't even really see how he's misbehaving, but the one guy smacks him in the back of the head, like, fucking behave yourself, you know?
Yeah.
It shows some respect.
He's smacking 666 in the back.
Yeah.
So you see that they're being rehabilitated just by these little gestures in the background and stuff. It's spectacular. It's a masterpiece. And one of you guys threw out that they began this in 93?
93, yeah.
Okay, because Marvels came out in, like, 94.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Ross was planning this work in 93. He didn't really get to start working on it until midway through 94 and didn't get published until 96. He's gone on to say that he wanted this to be exactly what it is. He wanted it to be a premonition of the new type of, like, Neo-Gold, Neo-Silver Age comics, stepping away from all the destruction of the 80s type era of comics. But instead, by the time he had written it and gotten published in 96 and really became prominent in 97, it was basically just a study of what was happening at the time.
Yeah,
because at that point, a lot of works had been published and, like, you could really see the creative dead end of, like, the 80s era and, like, the new ushering in of, like, all these other comics coming in. Obviously, like, a lot of works come to mind, like Marvels and Supremacy and stuff like that, or Supreme.
Can you imagine how long it took like Alex Ross to go and hand paint all of that
Physically, he says it took
like
like 2 years.
It's
holy
unbelievable.
shit.
I can't believe that it took that little time. I mean, it seems like this could have taken an artist 7 to 10 years.
And you gotta keep in mind that during that same period, he did Marvels and he was doing the covers for Astro City.
Yeah.
He was not
And he was still
inactive in other, like he was a very busy man. He must have been in the mid-90s.
Yeah.
Kudos to Mr. Alex Ross.
And I mean, he has built a career off of this book.
Yeah.
He has worked, man.
He has his own company now.
Yeah.
Dynamite is his company. And he can
runs
pretty much-
Dynamite.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure, yeah.
Okay, I know he works with them. He's put out weird shit at Dynamite, doing things very similar to this. You know?
And he can make a living. Honestly, at this point, he can sit back and make a living off commissions, covers, and T-shirts.
They pay him to do like DVD box sets and stuff like that. Yeah,
and I'm sure man's doing well, but I think this is really the high point of his oeuvre. Do you have anything?
As far as portraying like the classic level superheroes, I don't think anyone does it better than him.
Nah.
As far as like rendering what they look like in real life, and as far as really bringing that gold age era over, his portrayal is superior to all of them. My personal opinion.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think it's a high point of it. I think it plays into the revisionist excuse me, message in the story, because like no matter what you're looking at, no matter how violent or grotesque in the story, it still feels like wonderful and like almost majestic and like holy. So I feel like his art played into the narrative just as much as any of the dialogue did. So
he takes things that are supposed to be ridiculous, right? Like ideas and images and characters and costumes that really people had wanted to step away from. We were sort of as a community embarrassed of our own history at this point. He puts it front and center and paints it exactly as it would appear. Like the stupid Godzilla looking characters look like they're made out of rubber. They really do look like artificial, like Ray Harryhausen creatures and stuff. The costumes have all the kooky oddities to them that you would expect, that you would make you embarrassed. Like, you'd step away from it and be like, that's too weird. I want to put a pouch there to block out Captain Marvel's crotch or whatever. It's the second time in this podcast I brought that up. Weird.
Don't worry, no one's judging.
Yeah. And he treats it with such dignity and such respect that you accept it. You fall back in love with it, And that's, to me, is his power. And it's the power of this story,
I think it's a good note to end on. I think that wraps up our Kingdom Come podcast. I feel like we may come back to this one because I feel like there are thoughts lingering in the void. But for now, we'll be signing off. Does anybody have any comic book recommendations for this week? If not,
why, I'm glad you asked, Brando.
Please, shout out.
I always have one for you.
Mm-hmm. Please go ahead.
As you guys may have known, this is the first week of Convergence, not counting, 0 week. But I really feel strongly that you should go and get Convergence, The Question by Greg Rucka. Okay, he wrote some Batwoman, and this is just kind of a cool follow-up to Renee Montoya, The Question from pre-New 52 shit, and it's really awesome to see her back in action, and who she gets to. It's pretty much fan service for you, everyone who loves The Question. Buy this fucking book. Prove to DC your love, and bring The Question back. It's been far too long since we had The Question.
Yeah, I'll second that, because The Question, Greg Rucka's run, pretty much picked up in 52 where Denny O'Neil's classic Question run had left off, and then continued it on into its own run as the backup feature, and in Final Crisis Revelations, and now this is the natural progression. All of it had been gone with New 52, but once again, I'd like to say, vote with your dollar, bring back old 52 elements that were good, like The Question. And since I don't want to exactly mimic Dan, I'll also recommend you go out and read Denny O'Neil and Dennis Cowan's run on The Question. It was great. I think it's 6 trade paperback volumes it's collected into now. It really takes this really reactionary right-wing Steve Ditko character and just gradually breaks him down, literally kills him, and then rebuilds him as this Buddhist Zen warrior monk without a face who lives in the worst place on earth. It's the epitome of Dark Age comic books, but it's really well written, and it's one of the few cases I can think of where a character was invented, allowed to grow along a natural progression, experienced change, never regressed, and was then able to come to the natural conclusion of that storyline in 52, where he ultimately died, and you got to feel like you watched the entire life of a comic book character happen over the course of 40 years or so, rather than seeing one of these eternal 80-year histories where you return to the status quo after 5 years because people miss Barry Allen. So I recommend The Question as well, but by Denny O'Neil and Dennis Cowan. But
I think what we're trying to tell you is that we love The Question.
The Question.
Yeah. That sounds good. I'm going to be recommending Grayson #7 by Tim Seeley, Tom King, and Stephen Mooney. I believe it's the most recent one, unless I haven't picked out 8 yet. It's a continuation of the Dick Grayson gone Grayson agent for his little cypher agency. He's in a battle with the Fist of Cain with Helena Bertinelli. It's getting pretty good. I feel like this issue is a bit, admittedly, much slower than recent Graysons, if you've been keeping up with the story. I'm trying to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, but yeah, the plot slows down, but there's still plenty of humorous character moments, and I really enjoyed this one. So if you're enjoying Grayson as well, it's a nice change of pace. I did kind of feel yearning, like it felt a little too slow for me, but on the whole, I enjoyed it. You guys should check it out if you're still reading Grayson, or if you haven't yet. It's a good place to cop in because it's not too heady with the ideas. Because if you enter at 1, which is a good place to start, but don't start at 3, it's kind of crazy. Jim, anything for us? If not, it's okay.
Let's see. It's April.
It is April.
It's April. This month on the 1st marks the 20th anniversary of the publication of Preacher, which is a Vertigo title. My favorite comic book of all time. I'm not sure that I have recommended it before in the past. If I have, I'm just doing it again because it's that good. It's 20 years old, freaking me out. Recommending Preacher. It's absolutely beautiful.
All right, sounds good. Well, I think that wraps us up for this week on the Paper Good Podcast. As always, like, comment, subscribe. Let us know what you guys think. You know, we always appreciate your input. If we can talk to you about comics, we'd always love that. But as always, have a good day. Have a good life. We'll see you next time.